And okay. So first, I want to welcome you to our twice monthly banking webinar series with JFS. And this topic today is how to rescue and protect your money. We are proud to partner with our community banks and providing quality programming to all of our clients and JFS supporters. I'm Kristen Lobenstein. I'm the manager of financial coaching services here at JFS. And I am so pleased to introduce you to Katrina, or Kay Chambers. She's the Community Business Development Officer with Truist Bank. JFS has been partnering with Truist, formerly BB&T, for many years, and we're so happy to have her join us today. Kay has over 20 years of experience in the financial services industry. Her personal purpose statement is to use her time and talents to help clients, teammates, and the whole community achieve their financial goals and dreams. She has received multiple awards and accolades in her career for retail banking sales and service. Welcome to our banking series, Kay. You take it from there.
Awesome. And I'm really excited to present with 2 or 10 or 200, because this information is so important. And the more that we can discuss it with truth, the more we can help people truly protect and rescue their money. These days, more than ever, rates are going up, prices are going up, and what you have, you truly want to protect. So without any further ado, I just love to dive right in. I'll advance to our next slide, which is simply a review of the importance of having a checking account. It's a powerful budgeting tool. Depending on your financial background and your acumen growing up, you may or may not have been exposed to having a checking account, or the importance of it, or the fact that it truly does save you money rather than cost you money. It's safer to use than cash. Checks and debit cards will provide you with proof that you've paid someone. If you've ever had to prove that the light bill was paid, you've got that record. You can deposit and make routine transactions without cost. Now, why does that even come up? There are some people using methods that charge them to make deposits. For example, if you have a debit card only relationship, sometimes you're actually charged money to put money in your own account. It doesn't make sense. So please, let's try to avoid that. You obviously will have access to the information, your balance, routine transactions that have occurred. You can get digital records as well as paper records, and some of the digital platforms are even categorizing things. So it's a truly essential tool in your financial toolkit. And so the checking account is something that you want to build a moat around and keep it safe. So in the many years that I've been in the banking industry, there are several best practices that we always stress to our clients. Number one, you want to keep that account safe by staying in the loop. Look at it. Even if there's been the same amount in there for days on end, doesn't matter. Check in. Be the first to know what's going on. And these days, you can set up alerts through your digital platforms to provide you with some information. And I'll go over that more. I enjoy peace of mind, just knowing that if you register to have access to be able to view your account information, the banks are using very safe protocols. So if you go directly to your bank, you can feel confident that we've taken steps to protect that information to be viewed. And it's okay for you to turn off paper correspondence if you don't open it up and dig into it monthly. You can also get support even online. There's chat features that will pop up. We will proactively reach out to you, but not by email, and you'll know it's us. They'll try to fool you. And that's part of the reason why we have to stop and talk about ways to protect your money. So these are the things that we stress to clients when we bring them on board. We want them to stay informed, have that information at their fingertips, and know that they can count on us. We're happy to help them. Moving on to some of the examples of digital platforms. Nowadays, almost everyone has a smartphone. And here is a nice example of our revised mobile app. You can get access to your account information. You can set up notifications to literally send you information on anything. Personally, I have text notices turned on my account so that if transactions over a certain dollar amount occur, I will immediately get a text. And so that's a good way to keep track of the money while you're multitasking all the other things that you're doing in your day. You can also even get a balance sent to you every morning. I remember back when I first started in banking, it said 30 years, I don't know why, or 20 years. It's been a really long time, but they let kids work. No, just kidding. But back when I was a teller and brand new, we had a client that would literally walk in the bank every day for their balance, and they wanted it printed out. We had to stamp it with our old teller stamps that used to exist and hand it to that client. And, you know, I commended him. It was the way that he managed his information. But you don't have to do all that. Get dressed, go to the bank, look for a teller stamp. We don't have it. That information can be set up for you to occur automatically. And a banker will not at all be bothered to sit down and spend time with you to get those things set up. So don't feel overwhelmed. Once you get everything set up, it will start to be very smooth. Your cell phones and your tablets also have new biometric features that allow even more security, like thumbprint or facial recognition. You want to take advantage of that, as well as choosing a password that you'll remember or having somewhere safe to write it down. It's okay. The older you get, you may need to write it down, but we don't want to write it and stick it on your outside of your handbag or on the refrigerator. You want to keep it safe, and just know that when you choose different characters, it makes the password a bit stronger. And don't tell anyone, they don't need it. They can get the information the old-fashioned way if they have to have it and you're not available. So I'll go ahead to the next slide and really start to talk about how information is getting breached these days. So we had 3 best practices of things that you should do. And now we have the sort of big 3 fraud methods that occur that can really just wreak havoc on your finances. And the first one is social engineering. Marlene, you took yourself off mute. Did you have a question?
Actually, I did.
Yes, go right ahead. I wanted to have questions throughout so that.
Okay, great. You mentioned on the previous slide about passwords and, not posting on their refrigerator and so forth.
You're right, right.
I've heard recently twice from 2 different places. And also I saw something on the news, I think it was last week, that more and more companies are recommending and suggesting not using passwords, but to use passphrases, because they are less likely to be hacked. It would take hackers years to figure out what phrase you have used.
Nice.
And so I wanted to share that.
That's
if anyone
great.
wanted to research doing that. And I thought, not a bad idea, I guess.
And you have to keep resetting them. That's actually a great idea. And here's a thought to sprinkle in some special characters.
Oh, absolutely, including that as well. So
yeah, so if there's an E, maybe you put the ampersand in instead. Or if you're looking for an A in that phrase, maybe you use the @ sign, the little A in the circle, whatever that's called. But that is a great tip. Thank you for sharing that.
That is, I mean, I have heard taking a phrase and the first letter from each word and building a password from that, because it's relatively random. So you kind of, and you definitely characters and numbers within, it's relatively random, but it is something you would recommend, that you would remember. So like my family and I, we used a song, and the first letter of the words in the song plus some numbers and characters became kind of our family password.
That is huge.
I like the phrase idea too.
Yeah. Excellent. Love that. Thanks so much. Oh, there you are, Marlene. I see you. Awesome. All right. So
Thanks. That was accidental.
yeah, no, we could see you. It's all good. But that's exactly what the purpose and the value that you'll get from coming together, learning terms like the next three that I want to cover with you: social engineering, identity theft, and malware. This may be familiar to you, or it may be the first time you've ever heard these situations. And I can tell you, this is the way that people are being robbed of their money. Banks are not necessarily getting the folks walk in, go and stick them up. They're coming at us in a lot of different ways, and we're going to cover a couple of those. The first being the most troubling: social engineering. So the fraudsters are posing as your friends, colleagues, or someone you would trust to try to fool you into revealing your personal information. They also target our seniors, pretending to be the IRS or Social Security. It's really shameful, which is why there have been more federal regulations created to go after people that do that. And I can tell you, if you're interested, the Federal Trade Commission does open calls in your communities, and they talk about people that they catch, especially right after COVID. There was a whole slew of fraud being perpetrated, and the FTC immediately got in on some of that and have gone after a lot of the bad guys. So it does happen a lot, but there are many agencies behind the scenes trying to thwart that behavior. Identity theft, that's the more traditional, where they've either lifted the number physically from you, or your personal information, name, social security number, or they've used another method to gather that information, like a hack, if you're familiar with some of the famous ones, Target, Equifax. These breaches where this information was exposed will create a situation of identity theft. And then malware, which is literally two words smashed together: malicious and software. That's actually most common deployed through emails. And so your bank often has flyers lying around. I know at Truist, when we see a lot of these, oh, you got to send this wire here because your house closing is in jeopardy. And it's someone who has intercepted information and they're trying to get you to wire money to them. They'll send you an email. They'll never call you. So the bank often puts out emails with kind of, this is what's going on, or we print out flyers. So if you don't bank with us, your bank is probably trying to provide that information to you inside the branches. And text messages and emails, like I said, are the number one sources of malware deployment. It's really bad stuff. Internally in our bank, we actually have a system. It's like just like a crime watch. If we receive an email that's malicious, we actually have an internal button that we can click and send that email over for more oversight. Now, people don't have that, but people do have their bankers and their sources of information to help them identify those bad, malicious malware attacks. And what you'll find is a little bit more time on the email, and then I'll cover this right here. But what you'll find in the email is a word will be misspelled, or the sentence won't truly make sense. and it'll be signed by something like HR or, closing department. And it just will be just a little off. But the rest of it, they'll really try to make it look official. They'll go to our websites and clip in our logos, and they'll really try to take you there. But look at the whole thing and then stop and ask yourself, should I be receiving this information in this way? And then call someone. So social engineering, I thought we should take a deeper dive and talk about that, because there's some funny terms that have been born out of this type of fraud. And again, it's when someone poses as someone you know or trust to try to get your information. This a lot of times happens by phone. Also phishing, which that PHISHING, that's through legitimate looking emails. That's one way. Smishing, which is just, it's using text instead of an email to do the same thing. And what's been going on lately, Amazon, your package hasn't arrived, and click here, and suddenly you're exposed. So the text messages will try to bring you in to another place to get your information, or link you to someone who will then talk to you to get that information. And then the voice, that's the people that are calling you with spoofed phone numbers, and they're trying to look and sound official to gather your information. Someone calls you first, tell them, you appreciate the call and you would prefer to make calls like that yourself, and don't go along with it, because even the bank, if they're calling you, they'll invite you in to talk. They shouldn't be trying to do a full loan application unsolicited with you by phone. It doesn't make sense. But when you see something that says, oh gosh, this looks like the bank, it tricks you. And that is a huge source of loss. So, gosh, it's terrible. What do we do? Even when you've done everything right, you didn't click the text message, you sent the email to the fraud oversight, and you still notice that something has happened, then you want to immediately call your bank. There are separate time frames built into reporting these types of loss, and so you need to move quickly, which is why I started the presentation just by encouraging you to stay informed, to know what's going on, to create a structure that will help you by sending you texts and alerts. Then we talked a lot about the 3 big ways that they try to go after your information, but it does still happen, and it happened to me. And so when I noticed that my card was immediately used somewhere in New York and I was here in Houston, I called. It does happen. And so we'll talk now about the ways that this information will appear and what's actually going on. In the next slide here, it says that fraud can either occur electronically or by check. So I spent a little time to talk about examples of electronic fraud and also paper fraud. In the area of paper fraud, check stock. Checks can be purchased at office supply stores, and the banks just cringe every time we see a Versa check. It's a lovely idea to be able to print your own checks, but it's a bad idea because the fraudsters print their own checks as well. If there's ever been a situation where your account number and the bank's routing number have gotten into the wrong hands, it was harmless, you wrote a check for some Girl Scout cookies, or somebody went and cashed a check in a place that they shouldn't have, that information is exposed and now subject to fraud. If you take a step back to the people that don't have accounts, they will take their payroll check and go to a check casher and cash that check, and that has just exposed the business to this kind of fraud. So Paper is still the #1 way that people in banks are robbed every day, and it's Versa checks and the fact that that information got out. Another thing to be careful of is checks by mail. Again, we're going away from checks, and thank goodness, but in the past, when you went to the bank, it said checks are $20 and you got something in the mail that said checks are $4. You were tempted to go to the $4 source. Just think about it. What information is on a check? Everything. We're going to look at that in a minute. So it's better to go through your bank. Electronic fraud, which is the other kind, it's prevalent when your debit card is used and information is physically skimmed from a device that criminals will place in things like gas pumps. I know you got to use your card. That's why we're going touchless a lot, as if you can tap instead of insert your card, that would be better. If you got to insert, what I do is I go to the gas pump that's closest to the door of the gas station, because I know there'll be video taken in that area. And if my card is breached, but I'm looking at it every day, we would have more information. And also the skimmers don't want to walk up and be seen placing their devices inside of something where they can, be caught. So if you got to insert your card, just try to look around. There's things you can buy. You don't have to go bananas, but just if it seems a little weird, don't put it in. Debit card numbers can also be breached. And this again happens when retailers' POS systems are hacked. This does happen a lot. And Equifax and Target are some examples of some recent breach that have happened. And, it creates exposure that could manifest months and years later. So it's the kind of thing that, if you obsess, it would keep you up at night, but we don't want you to do that, because especially with debit cards, there's zero liability, but you got to tell us quick. You got to look at it and go, oh my gosh, this is not me. How quick? 60 days. It is so important that you write it down. I didn't put this in the presentation. I thought about it. I was like, oh, that should have been in here. But I knew I would tell you. So if you see a mistake and it's electronic, it came from your debit card or somebody zapped into your account some way, you've got to tell the bank within 60 days. So stepping back a little bit to the check. So we kind of talked about both and how they could physically get that information. And the check fraud, again, is huge. We get tons of bad checks every day. I literally get an email with an example of a check that someone tried to present because they got it in the mail, or somebody, Craigslist said they had a job, and if they just cash that check, they can, work. I don't understand. But knowing the elements of a check yourself will help you take your time knowing that it's legitimate. And there's just some things that happen when there's fraud that we spotted immediately. Usually the fonts are different. On this check, the font is consistent all across the check. There might be something in this area, but the font should all be the same. Any reputable check printer will use one font on a check. The number is here. The banks, when we go through and create checks for you through our vendors, we also embed that check number either here or it could be over here. And literally when the check is physically processed, we put a little more information here. So that's just trivia for you. But knowing what a check should look like, they'll have these security features and watermarks. Those Versa checks have that. So that's not going to make it not appear fake. What's going to tip you off is the fonts. I got to tell you, this will be 12 and that'll be 24. And it's not going to happen. So just many times we don't use checks, but if you get one and you take a look at it, you go, oh yeah, okay, they are kind of all the same, and it's all Arial or whatever. But it's critical because if you receive a check, this is a physical contract, and it is the kind of thing that we can really and truly pursue criminals about. So we do like it. We can also lift fingerprints. It's incredible. It's a little bit easier to catch the folks that do check fraud, but they're going away from it these days to try to use the electronic means. So in the next slide, it's just a reminder that even though these things happen all the time, your bank accounts are federally protected and you're insured. And so if you do your part and monitor what's going on in the account and let us know the minute you see that something is wrong, you'll be fine. So there are two regulations that I wanted to just expose you to that cover what we've been talking about right now. The electronic transactions that occur are all regulated by Reg E, and the government's so transparent. E, you could just think of electronic. And so it covers money movement within the banking system. That's very important because there's money movement in the banking system, and there's also money moving outside of the banking system. So it's better to move your money where there's scrutiny. And we'll talk a little more about that in a minute, but direct deposit is covered under Reg E. If you ever wondered what ACH stood for, it's Automated Clearinghouse. Any debits and credits, I know sometimes insurance companies want a debit, or your light company wants to take money out for your monthly bills. Those are initiated using ACH, or the Automated Clearinghouse. All check card transactions are governed by Reg E, and as well as credit card transactions. On the credit cards, you typically may have a small monetary liability, but on check cards, it's zero liability. You just have to check with the credit cards. Most of them say zero liability as well, but they do have a little cushion that kind of hold back if there was a fraud situation and they ended up resolving it. There could be a small amount that's not returned, depending on the card, and I wouldn't want that one. The other regulation that covers the paper items, which you could think of CC as checks clearing. It's this regulation, again, it covers checks that are going and being presented within the banking system. So personal checks, official checks, or cashier's checks, which are the ones that you get issued at the bank, by the bank for you. Money orders, which you can buy at third-party vendors, and you can also get postal money orders if you were thinking of them in terms of which is better, the postal. If you got to get that MoneyGram post, it'd be down here. These are, though, confidential. If you've got to give someone a paper check, if you give them this, it doesn't have your account number on it. It has the bank's number. So here's a thought. Business checks and even drafts. There, in the past, there was a thing called a site draft that we used to have to do, and it was sort of, you have to pay it on site, and it had a whole list of things that you had to do in order to agree to make payment. We don't hardly use those anymore, but I just threw it in for conversation. I'm going to stop here and ask what questions y'all have right now about what we've talked about so far, because the next section, you'll probably have a lot. Okay, pretty clear. So there are none.
Okay, I just want to throw in there that one of the first slides you said about monitoring your own bank account. I actually had an account that we were using for a rental property. So we were just depositing money into it every month so that we could cover repairs and property taxes. And we weren't monitoring it. And over the course of a year and a half, we lost several $1,000s because someone had gotten into the account. I still don't know how. And they were just siphoning money off. And I mean, it got what it drew our attention to is all of a sudden they bought a wheelchair.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, they were sending money to these and they were paying bills in California and all. And so once we finally discovered it, we were horrified because the fact was we weren't paying attention. We're like, oh, it's just a savings account. It's just sitting there. But
Yeah.
somehow someone got the information on the account. And what you said about monitoring the account, man, now, we have alerts all over the place, for any money movement.
That is huge because we do have accounts like that. You may have even credit accounts that you zeroed out and you don't have a balance on it, so you don't bother to peek at it. Again, it's the wrong approach. You are on the hook for whatever happens out there. So you almost have to schedule it in your day to, okay, I know I don't have a balance here, but I'll just go check it on this day every month. It's the burden is on us. That's why, you want to simplify things, and you also want to build a relationship with a banker because we will look out for you. Like my client who used to come in for the balance every day. When he didn't come in, we called, hey, you okay? You didn't come in today. So that still happens every day. And it's so important because we're there to try to protect that information, and we know how the attacks are coming. So we've just talked a lot about money moving within the banking system. And now this next part, like I said, you probably will have some questions about these because the next ways to move money, cable money is actually an older form of moving money between persons. And an example of cable money would be Western Union. And it is moved money with outside of the banking system. So it is not regulated by you can't go to the FDIC, the OTC and say, hey, Western Union didn't send my money to grandma in Oklahoma. Those transactions outside of the banking system have to be solved if there are issues outside of the banking system. So we want you to carefully understand what it means. It all looks easy, but you want to move your money and have your money where it's most protected. MoneyGram, it's the same thing. It's banks used to kind of participate in that. It would be, but it was so open to fraud, which is why we really got out of it. Someone could literally go to a bank, and even if the person that they want to get money to doesn't bank with them, they can have the bank send it somewhere, and then they would have to come in and show ID and get that. It became cumbersome. It's very suspicious. It's now just convenient and hip and fun. And so people are moving money this way a lot. They don't realize what they're losing when they move money this way. That being said, there's pop money, and you may never have heard the term pop. And I don't even exactly know what it means, but it's more like person-to-person transfers of money. And so you'll see PayPal. I think they were one of the early players. Apple Pay, Venmo, Cash App, and Zelle. These are the ways to get money personally between people. And for most of those platforms, the money is moving outside of the banking system. So that means if something happens and there's fraud, your recourse, again, is not with the bank. It's with those holders, those Venmos and Apple Pays, and it becomes very difficult to recover when you use these methods to move money. I'll start with Zelle because I said most. Now, Zelle is a platform that you can go, like if you have a cell phone and you download your apps, you can go and download an app for Zelle, and you can use it by linking something to it in order to be a funding source. The banks thought Zelle was a good idea, so they actually bought Zelle, and it's delivered in two different ways, and you didn't realize that. Zelle can be initiated inside of some of the banking platforms, and it also can be initiated through the app that you can download on your phone. So Recently, there was some breach and fraud with Zelle. I can tell you it was not the Zelle that's inside your bank account, but it was the Zelle that was part of the app, which was the standalone company. Well, gosh, that's so confusing. Why is it that way? It's popular and it makes money somehow. And so it exists. I have not ever been able to recover money for a client through pop money means. When it's gone, it is gone. Even wire transfers, we always say, are you sure it's their bank account? Because wires are kind of a, once you pull the trigger on it, it's very difficult. But even wires can be recovered through bank cooperation, but moving money in these ways, the risk is all on the sender. And so I want you to be careful. These are reputable platforms. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of them, but I would advise you to use the banking system to move money rather than any other. And we're trying to be as convenient as possible, which is why we bought Zelle. Cash App is still its own thing. PayPal also, Apple Pay, of course, Apple wants to rule the world and they're their own thing, but they offer some protection, but who reads that? I can't give you any advice on recovering. You literally have to go to bat with the issuers and the movers and those companies when fraud occurs. So with that being said, what questions do you have about new ways to move money and the fraud that's coming up? That's good. That means I covered a lot. I'm not saying any of these are bad. Really, please don't misunderstand me. Just the whole purpose of this conversation is to give you ammo to keep things safe, to build that moat around your money. And the way to do that is inside of your bank account, knowing that the banks are regulated, knowing that they have to prove, just like you, the information that goes on within your account. So the very last screen that I've prepared for you is just a reminder that your bank accounts, when it is a national bank, they are required to provide and be insured by the FDIC. There are limits, and I apologize, this slide was not this color, but this part right here that's a little difficult to read, it says the FDIC, which is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, insures certain accounts, it's the ones at the bank for people, up to $250,000 in case a bank fails. So the insurance is there if the bank is misbehaving, the regulations are there if the transactions are going wrong and people are misbehaving against your account. So the bank accounts that are covered are your most checking accounts, savings, money markets, CDs, IRAs. These are all covered with the insurance. And again, the bank is doing something wrong, you're protected in this way, and the regulations cover you when the transactions are a mess.
Okay, what's an example of a checking or savings money market account that's not insured, and how would you know it's not insured?
So if it is not insured, it could be an exposure issue in a bank. So for example, if you had one person with an account and it was their personal account and it's checking and they have $3 million in there, the limit to that basic level of insurance is $250,000. So there is exposure for that portion to be uninsured in the event, again, that the bank fails. So if you know you've got large amounts of money and you go to your bank, they can help you structure the account with beneficiaries and co-owners to provide you the most possible basic insurance. And then insurance is available above the minimums, but it's at client cost. It's really small. So there is a situation where that kind of account would not be fully insured. But the ones that come to mind that seem to look like an account that should be insured but are not are usually the ones that happen in brokerages. Like there was one, it was called Money Manager. I used to be a licensed representative, and a money manager account had a banking aspect to it, but the money was held in brokerage. And so there's another insuring entity that covers mutual funds and stocks and things like that. It's not the FDIC, it's SIPC, and it's a little bit different. But that would be an example of something that kind of looks like a bank account, but it may not be insured. Anything that goes through a credit union has a different insurance. It's NCUA instead of FDIC, similar limits, but credit unions obviously are a little bit different than banks, so they have different rules, and you just want to understand, what's covered when you get into the relationship. Great question, thank you. What other questions?
I have a question about money market funds. You've got money market deposit accounts that are covered by FDIC, but at the top portion, you've listed money market funds. Can you distinguish between the difference?
Yes, the money market accounts that are in banks, it's more of a name than, and there's a small semantic difference. They used to be called negotiable order of withdrawal accounts, and the money market accounts at a bank would be a savings account with a check writing feature. Those attributes do not apply to money market funds. These are more of a traditional brokerage account where funds are held, and the type of funds that are being held or invested in within that brokerage account could be money market. So there are, for example, if you choose an index fund, like, an index fund, one of them, NASDAQ index fund. So it's a money market fund because it's not just one thing, it's sort of an aggregate of the behavior of this index. So that would be an example of a money market fund at a brokerage versus a money market account at a bank, which is a fancy savings with some check writing.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Other questions? I've been doing this a really long time, and it still just shocks me every day, the things that will happen. Hopefully some of the tips that I shared when you're using your card will help you. And I also like to advise clients that if you have both a credit card and a debit card with your account, I want to encourage you to put the debit card in the vault, use the credit card for the perks that you get, and pay that credit card once a month. And if you do that, your account is more protected than if you bring out the check card and it's linked only to the funding source. It's kind of like extra exposure as opposed to a shield where you can still purchase. If you don't want to pay interest, you clear it out every month within the grace period, and you choose a card that pays you cash back or gets you miles, and you keep that check card nice and safe. And the only reason you want to use that thing is when you go to your own bank's ATM and use it to get out cash. That is a strategy that I'm highly recommending to keep your account safe, because now that number is not tied to all the purchases that you're making every day: gas, lunch, coffee. Thank you.
A lot of people are not that disciplined though, and that's why they love debit cards. And until about a year and a half ago, I had no desire or any intention to have a debit card because of some of the things that you are talking about.
Right. I mean, if you give a purpose to the tools that you have, just like you would in your kitchen, you've got some knives that are good for slicing and some that are for carving. And if you give a purpose to that financial tool and try to use it in that way, it's also a way to keep things safe and protected. So I know people, especially with interest rates going up, if you don't feel disciplined, don't try it that way. Then what you need to do is look every day. Have the alerts trigger you. Oh, I didn't make a withdrawal, call the bank. So if there's a way to work around, I can't get a credit card, okay, turn on notifications. I like credit cards, great, get your cash, pay it off every month. So there's a way to do this.
That's great advice. I never thought about that like that, because I only have American Express, so I pay that off every month. And I like to get the points, but sometimes I like to use my debit card because I know that I'm paying for it right then and there. So that's great advice. I never thought about it from a safety standpoint.
It does create that exposure, because tied to the debit card is the account with all the money that's in it. So debit cards do have limits. It's part of the reason they do, but you've been with your bank a long time, you might have a big limit. It's just inconvenient, because when these things happen, even when you report them, it may be up to 24 hours to 48 hours before you get credit for any lost money. So just think of ways to be as safe as possible. Hopefully these gave you some good ideas.
Yeah. I've also heard if you have Venmo, clear it out, you have it transferred to your bank. Especially if someone pays you in a large dollar figure, send it to your bank as quickly as possible and get it out of your Venmo account.
Yeah. PayPal too. People leave a ton of money in PayPal, and what happens is they forget it's there. And they know you're going to forget, or they'll send you an email every day going, hey, get some credit. It's, they're competing with the banks, but they're not as regulated. So you have to be very careful.
Yes. So are there any more questions for Kay? This great presentation. This was awesome. Anybody?
I have a quick question. It appears that you are, I guess, growing your presence in the DFW market. Is that true to say? Or?
Well, absolutely. Texas is a newer market for Truist, which is Truist is simply the culmination of BB&T, which is about a 152-year-old bank, and SunTrust Bank, which also has about the same amount of existence. They got together in 2019, wanted to merge. We had a COVID, we had to wait, but Texas is definitely an expansion market for this bank, but you can feel confident that they've been around a really long time, and they're very, very careful. I've worked for a couple of others, and I am amazed at what they can do for a bank of this size. Regional, not national, but very, very strong and very, very focused on people and community and working with the community.
We have definitely seen that at JFS over the years. Absolutely. And I want you all to know that we used to do these in person at JFS, and we really hope to bring this back in person, to have these types of meetings so that, we're closer together and can really encourage, a lot of interaction. So you guys have been a great partner of ours. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more second. Anybody else? Does anybody else want to ask Kay, this great expert, any more questions about keeping your money safe? Okay, I want to say again. Oh, wait, I think I heard something. Marlene?
No question, just a comment. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you. And I am in the process of reviewing to potentially, I have not had an actual bank account in many, many years. And I feel like I want to have one. So you're one of the 3 banks that I'm looking at. So I'll be doing some additional research to, check things out, and maybe call and ask some questions, or come in and talk with someone. And that was another reason why I wanted to join today's webinar. So thanks very much.
Awesome. That's great. I'll be happy to share my contact information. Or would you plan on doing that, Kristen, after providing the slides, or should I just put it in chat?
Yeah, go ahead and put it in the chat.
Okay. I
It
certainly
will
will.
be on when we post it on our website, but that, may take a week or so, so.
Okay, yeah, it's Katrina, but only when I'm in trouble, but I'm gonna go ahead and put it out there. Kay is just what everybody at home calls me. And my phone number in the office. And my email address. And I know bankers in Dallas area, so don't be bothered that I sit in Houston. I go all over and I'll make sure I know where you are, and I'll find you a banker that will be able to connect with you.
That's wonderful.
Super, thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, Kay, thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it from all of us at JFS. And we hope to see Truist in person again very soon.
I'm ready. Let me know.
I know that we've already lost 1 or 2 people, but I'm just gonna throw this out there.